Most people think you need a big orchard to grow fruit, wide rows, tall trees, ladders, time. But some of the sweetest harvests come from trees no taller than you, a single little tree, in a quiet corner of a yard, on a sunny patio, sometimes even in a pot, can still give you blossoms in spring, and something real to pick with your hands. And today, I want to walk you through every type of dwarf fruit tree, what they actually are, how they're different, and which one is right for your space and your lifestyle. Because here's the truth most people don't hear at the garden center. Not everything labeled dwarf is truly dwarf. And if you choose the wrong kind, you don't just lose space, you lose years. If you're over 45, you already know something. We stop chasing bigger, and we start chasing better. A calmer morning, a quieter garden, fewer things, but chosen with care. That's why dwarf fruit trees are such a beautiful idea. They don't demand an orchard. They don't demand a ladder. They don't demand that you become a full-time farmer. They fit into real life. But before we start naming apples and peaches and lemons, we need to understand the simple system behind all of it. Because the secret isn't the fruit. It's what's underneath. When people say fruit tree, they usually imagine a big tree. That's a standard tree, often 20 feet tall, sometimes 30. A standard tree can be wonderful, but it's a commitment, a long commitment. Then we have semi-dwarf, not tiny, but more manageable, usually around 12 to 18 feet, depending on the type and how you prune. And then we have true dwarf. This is where the magic happens for small spaces. True dwarf trees often stay around 6 to 10 feet. That means you can reach your fruit. You can prune without fear. You can protect blossoms from a late frost. You can net against birds. You can actually care for the tree without it turning into a yearly battle. But here's the mistake people make. A lot of nurseries use the word dwarf loosely. Sometimes they mean smaller than standard, not actually small. So how do you know what you're buying? You look at one word, rootstock, if you've never noticed it before. Fruit trees are often two trees in one. The top part, the variety. That's the fruit you want. Honeycrisp, Gala, Bartlett, Santa Rosa. But the bottom part, the root system, is what controls the size, the strength, and often the timing. That bottom part is called rootstock. And rootstock is why one apple tree becomes a gentle patio tree, while another becomes a giant that wants to fill your whole yard. Rootstock can influence how big the tree gets, how fast it fruits, how well it handles wet soil, how it tolerates cold, and how much support it needs. So when someone says, this is a dwarf apple tree, the real question is, dwarf on what rootstock? Pause. And once you understand that, everything becomes calmer, because you stop guessing and you start choosing. Now, let's walk through the main types, and I'll tell you what they're truly best for. The most dependable choice, if you want the most reliable dwarf fruit tree for many gardens, start with apples. Dwarf apple trees are popular for a reason. They're productive, they respond well to pruning, and they often fruit sooner than people expect, sometimes in 2 or 3 years, especially if you care for them gently. But apples have one important detail. Most need a pollination partner. That doesn't mean you need a second big tree. It can be another dwarf, or a nearby crabapple, or even a neighbor's tree if you're lucky. For many people, apples are the steady friend of the garden. Not too fussy, not too dramatic. Just a quiet tree that says, if you show up for me, I'll show up for you. And if you live in a place with real winters, apples often feel like they belong. Now, if you want something a little more romantic, let's talk peaches. Patio peaches. Beauty you can eat. There's something about peaches. Even before the fruit, the blossoms feel like a promise. Dwarf peaches and nectarines can be wonderful in small spaces, especially in containers. Many are self-pollinating, which means one tree can still give you fruit. They like sun, they like warmth, they like good drainage, and they do need attention, because peaches can be sensitive. But the payoff is the kind that makes you slow down. Because when a peach is truly ripe, it isn't something you rush. You pick it, you smell it, and for a moment, you remember what summer used to feel like. Now, if peaches are the romance, pears and plums are the quiet strength. Calm, sturdy, practical. Dwarf pears can be a great choice, but they come with one word you should remember: fire blight. It's a bacterial disease that can hit pears hard in some regions. That doesn't mean don't plant pears. It means choose varieties and rootstocks wisely and keep your pruning clean. Plums, on the other hand, often feel easier, especially in places with cooler summers. Some plums are surprisingly tough, and they can produce generously without asking for too much. With pears and plums, the goal is simple. Give them sun, give them airflow, and don't overwater. And if you do that, they reward you quietly. But now we're going to step into a different world, a world that smells like blossoms almost all year. Citrus, the indoor-outdoor dream. If you live in a colder climate, citrus might sound impossible, but dwarf citrus changes the conversation. A dwarf Meyer lemon, a calamonden, the small orange. These trees can live in pots. They can move with the seasons. They can spend summer outside and winter in a bright window or under a grow light. And there's something deeply comforting about citrus. The leaves, the fragrance, the idea that you can still have a hint of sunshine, even when the world outside is gray. But citrus demands one thing more than most fruit trees: light. Real light. Not kind of bright. Not near a window that feels sunny. Citrus wants a strong, steady source of sun, and if you can give it that, it becomes one of the most rewarding, slow-life trees you can own. Now, there's one more category that surprises people, because these fruit trees don't just save space. They reshape the way your garden looks. Vertical fruit for small spaces. Some dwarf fruit trees grow upright, almost like living columns. Columnar apples are a perfect example. They don't spread wide. They don't take over. They rise, and that means you can plant them closer together, or along a fence, or even in a line that feels like a garden hallway. They're practical, but also strangely beautiful. And then there's espalier. That's when you train a fruit tree flat against a wall or trellis. It's not just gardening, it's craftsmanship. Espalier turns a fruit tree into living art. And for small yards, it can be one of the best ways to grow more with less space. Now, after all these types, I want to tell you something that saves people the most time. Because most dwarf trees don't fail because they're small. They fail because we treat them like they're big. The simple reasons dwarf trees struggle. Here are the most common mistakes I see. Number 1. Not enough sun. Dwarf doesn't mean shade tolerant. Fruit still wants energy. Number 2. Poor drainage. A dwarf tree in a pot or in heavy soil can drown quietly. And number 3. Forgetting support. Many true dwarf trees, especially apples on certain rootstocks, may need staking. Not because they're weak, because they're engineered to stay small and fruit early, and early fruit is heavy. So if you treat a dwarf tree with gentle support and consistent care, it becomes one of the most peaceful plants you can grow. Now, let's make the choice simple. Which one is right for you? If you want the easiest start, choose a dwarf apple. If you want something that feels like spring in your hands, choose a Patio peach. If you want fragrance and a little sunshine you can keep alive, choose dwarf citrus. But only if you can give it light. And if your space is narrow or you want something beautifully structured, look at columnar trees or consider espalier, because the best dwarf fruit tree isn't the rarest one. It's the one you'll actually enjoy caring for. In the next video, I'll show you exactly how to plant a dwarf fruit tree in the ground or in a container so it fruits faster and stays healthy for years. Because once you get the first one right, you don't just grow fruit, you grow a rhythm, a season, a slower kind of life.